As I mentioned just before the break, the American crew of the Maersk Alabama has regained control of their cargo ship after a hijacking earlier today off the coast of Africa. It is really only the latest in a particularly busy week for Somali pirates. This was the sixth seizure of a ship in the area. In fact, heavily armed gangs from the East African nation have taken hundreds of sailors hostage and collected millions of dollars in ransoms over the past couple of years. But the roots of Somalian piracy are much more complex than you might think. Ahmed Hussen is the national president of the Canadian Somali Congress. Ahmed, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about these complex roots, because Somali pirates didn't just suddenly appear off the coast of Africa a year or even 2 years ago. This goes much further back. So take us back to the beginning, if you would. What led to the appearance of pirates off the coast of Somalia?
I think in the beginning, about a decade and a half ago, what happened is, after the collapse of the central Somali government, there was no longer a coast guard. The Somali economic exclusive zone in the ocean is very rich in different kinds of fish, especially tuna, which is very lucrative to the world market. The collapse of the central government gave an opportunity to foreign trawlers to come and illegally fish within the Somali exclusive ocean territory.
Right.
And they did something worse than that. They came in and they bullied the small-scale Somali fishermen, rammed their boats, cut their nets, and sort of basically enforced their will in the Somali territory.
So these were international trawlers, fishing trawlers, after particularly rich bounty of especially tuna in Somalian international waters, Somalian waters, not internet, but Somalian
within
waters.
the economic exclusive zone.
Right.
And so when that happened, entire communities all across the long East African coast in Somalia, entire communities lost their livelihoods. These were people who depended on the ocean for their day-to-day living, but also small-scale trade, right? So that was coupled with a much worse problem, which is the dumping of chemical, nuclear, you name it. So when that happened, Somali fishermen had it. So what they did is they started to initially just sort of form a vigilante coast guard, to chase away these foreign trawlers and say, you know, we need to fish here. This is our waters. We've depended on these waters for hundreds of years. You know, just leave us alone in peace. And when that didn't work, vessels hostage. So that's the root of the problem.
So in some respects, when you look back at that, you can almost see that it's almost defensible that Somalian fishermen were protecting their own waters, basically. So what happened along the way to change things? How did we go from fishermen defending their own coastal waters to what is now one of the most pirate-infested bodies of water in the world?
Well, I'm glad you say almost defensible, because I'm not going to sit here and defend modern-day piracy in Somalia, because now it's evolved into a huge industry with different players and who
different players within Somalia
and abroad, probably, because it seems to be bigger than what it is right now. So I'm not going to sit here and defend that, because now it's become a much larger industry, and it seems to have evolved beyond the original defensible aims of these fishermen who had lost their livelihoods.
But it's really about the roots of what led to this. And this is what I'm trying to get at, because I'm interested in what you think. When you see what's happening now, there is an international fleet of naval vessels off the coast of Somalia, some of them steaming right now to relieve the Maersk Alabama and help its American crew. What do you think when you see the international response to this threat versus the response to the plight of Somali fishermen 10 or 12 years ago?
Well, it's sad, because at the time, if the international community had actually put a token amount compared to what they're spending now chasing these small boats, at the time, if they had defended Somalia's territorial integrity in the seas, we wouldn't have had this problem. But there's a larger issue here, coupled with the illegal fishing. Somalia loses $300 million a year.
In fishing?
In illegal fishing.
Right.
The highest estimate of what the pirates have made last year in ransom is about 100 million, 150 million at the most.
So
the lower estimates is 30 million, according to George Schlesinger.
Right.
So even if you take their criminal enterprise and then you compare it against the illegal fishing, it still doesn't compare.
The illegal fishing still benefits by about to the tune of at least $200 million.
That's one. And then on top of that, it's the huge loss that can never be calculated, the health negative effects of toxic dumping.
The toxic waste.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how did it become what it is now? It basically evolved, like I said. These guys started to take ships hostage, try to chase them away from the waters, and once they started getting ransom, then the ransom money became bigger than what they would make in a year.
Who wants to go back to fishing for tuna when you can make $1 million in one go, or $2 million in one go? The bottom line here is that Somalia has become the poster child of a failed state.
Absolutely.
And that's causing trouble well beyond the borders of Somalia. So what do you think needs to be done to address that and by consequence address the issue of this rampant piracy?
I think the world as it is now, with the use of technology, the fast movement of capital and other resources, you cannot ignore a country, a failed state, and hope for the best. It's going to affect the region. It's going to destabilize the entire world.
Isn't that a lesson we're learning with Afghanistan?
Absolutely. And Pakistan for that matter. So what needs to happen with Somalia is, and this is actually a cheaper way of doing it, less expensive, is to reinforce the local authorities who have the knowledge and who can actually tackle this problem. And finally, to actually give hope to those unemployed militiamen who resort to these kinds of activities. So you reinforce the local authority, you give the Somali people, they're already doing the heavy lifting by going through peace processes. You reinforce that, you give them hope, you also protect their waters, and you patrol these illegal dumping of nuclear waste by foreign trawlers.
A story that we haven't even really had time to get into in any depth, but hopefully we will in the future. Bottom line is we ignore this in the West at our own peril.
Absolutely. Yes.
Ahmed Hussen, thank you very much. It's good talking to you. Thanks for the context.
Thank you for having me.
Ahmed Hussen is the national president of the Canadian Somali Congress.